Welcome back to today's aviation news recap. You'd think after doing this now for 7 months after switching from just singular 3-minute videos, I'd have a better name for the series than Aviation News Recap, but guess what? I don't, so let's continue rolling with it. In today's video, there's going to be focus on the 737 MAX, actually some coverage on the upcoming Air Force One, and Qatar Airways. Let's begin with Qatar, where according to the Financial Times, the Doha-based company is nearing the formal acquisition of a stake in RwandAir, following much discussion and some pretty long-term planning. The two airlines are looking to finalise the stake purchase as early as next month, which is July. I know some of you may be watching this at a later date, or potentially in July, but this is being published in June. Qatar Airways sees excellent potential in the market, which RwandAir calls home, and in nearby regions. Therefore, investment has been a long time in the making. In fact, you can stretch back to before the global pandemic. Currently at an undisclosed figure, once finalised, the deal would see the Doha-based company acquire up to 49% of Rwanda's flag carrier, this being quite a significant stake, and while it isn't a majority, will see Qatar have a lot of control. Furthermore, the Qatar Airways tie-up has been delayed due to the effects not just of the global pandemic, but there were also many other factors. Now, though, the pair are inching closer to completing all the necessary paperwork. The tie-up with RwandAir would go a long way in Qatar Airways' previously announced investment in the new airport for Rwanda. This major airport that is looking to open in the latter stages of this decade is aimed at competing with nearby airlines and really being an alternative to Addis Ababa, and that being the home for Ethiopian Airlines. RwandAir has long been speculated also at joining the One World Alliance, and there's no shock horror here, but that is the alliance that Qatar Airways calls home. The joining of the alliance would allow the Rwanda-based company to obtain greater connectivity with partner airlines of Qatar. Talks of the company joining oneworld stretch many years back, so this certainly isn't fresh developments, but with Qatar Airways about to tie up the deal, obviously they are re-emerging back into the headlines, and they're not the only airline that is eyeing up oneworld, with Starlux in the last few weeks confirming its own interest in becoming a new member. Qatar Airways and RwandAir are coming together to really allow greater connectivity for Qatar and hopefully prospective oneworld partners, enabling greater access to the African market with the backing of a major airline. In a similar case to Starlux, analysts' opinions are oneworld needs to be calculated in its moves by adding airlines to its portfolio. It can't just go adding any company. Each company ultimately it adds needs to have something worth the airline's while, and typically be in a market where there is, say, untapped potential. Onto the Boeing 737 MAX, and production increases around this important single aisle have been delayed following new reports. Reuters sources state that Boeing has informed suppliers that it's delaying certain production milestones it hoped to be able to reach by several months. Boeing has faced pretty hefty pressures from the leading regulator, the Federal Aviation Administration. You don't need me to tell you that twice. As a result of these pressures, which have really stemmed from increased oversight, Boeing has been barred from increasing production. This for some time. The production restrictions do follow that door blowout incident, but that only led to further loose bolts being identified, and the multitude of issues really spiraled Boeing into a troubled spot that it's been unable to climb out of thus far. While Boeing has to inform suppliers of key data and expectations to basically prepare for a production increase that it can't do overnight, this has proved pretty difficult given the plane maker's sad current state of affairs. In March, for example, production rates were reported to have dropped well below double digits for many weeks, and a similar poor rate, while not as bad, has still continued. The FAA has looked to put its foot down on the plane maker to ensure that persistent struggles can cease and quality issues will no longer emerge. Boeing faces production restrictions on its 737 MAX and supply chain difficulties, which pose other concerns and mean stability cannot be achieved to appropriate levels within the business. Moreover, the end of supply chain disruptions that has been a key talking point, at least here on the channel, in the last 12 to 18 months, don't seem to be coming anytime soon. It's become the new normal, and manufacturers need to adjust their expectations and understand that this is becoming the new normal. And I know firsthand, a lot of the focus does sit on Boeing. Arguably, they're very much in the spotlight. But it is still a problem over at Airbus. Their aircraft are feeling the heat, and they are too. Meeting deadlines has become harder and harder for them. 2024, for Boeing at least, wasn't meant to pan out this way. While they did expect supply chain difficulties to continue, they believed that because they'd already been dealing with these effects for years, it would be at least well positioned to navigate them. But ultimately, the new crisis regarding its quality and focus on safely producing aircraft has thrown it more curveballs than first expected. Airline customers are ultimately next on the list of those to be impacted by the supply chain difficulties, and delays in production increases. As more and more carriers purchase aircraft, guess what happens? The backlogs grow, with manufacturers unable to increase production rates when they would like. Airline deliveries begin being delayed further. And while fantastic for us aviation enthusiasts, and certainly for me reporting the news, these orders are not small ones. In fact, they're mammoth 3-digit plus ones, and they add to the backlog quite considerably. The ramifications of the delays do vary considerably. In the worst case scenario, airlines will face pretty hefty financial burdens that they will later try and seek compensation for. Some airlines are looking to switch aircraft orders around, or they may enter the leasing market, deeming that a short-term solution to mitigate capacity loss. But basically, this doesn't have a good effect on anyone. Over to the last story. The next Air Force One is going to be delayed further, with the program's first flight delayed until March 2026 now. These delays represent a further 16 months added on, following an Air Force spokesperson confirming the development to the trade publication Breaking Defense. Delays for the next era of aircraft to be utilized to carry the president and obviously act as Air Force One are not uncommon and probably should be expected. This program has ultimately seen Boeing suffer billions in losses and associated delays as it battles with, as briefly touched on, its own problems. In the last quarter of 2023, Bloomberg were very clear in reporting that the first power on of this next-gen and highly specialized 747-8 to transport the president would be delayed until the middle of 2024. And so much has changed in that 6-month window that now, with the middle of 2024 coming and going, Breaking Defense says that has slipped through to a 2025 first power on and a first flight now in the first quarter of 2026. These latest delays, however, are at the absolute earliest. Given everything that has happened and everything we've learned across the last 4 to 5 years, timelines are very, very hard to follow. And with this endeavour, many people would expect further delays. While there have been updates surrounding its first flight, there is certainly a lack of clarity regarding the eventual delivery and entry into service. You'd imagine you need to take these kinds of things one step at a time. Boeing has certainly learnt their lesson with regards to that after shooting through so many timelines for their uncertified commercial aircraft and being unable to stick with them, to now it being a bit of an unknown. And while that's frustrating for members of the public, it's probably a little bit better than them continuously saying a said plane will enter at a said date and then not being able to follow through with that. For Boeing, they're facing pressures from every angle, and this endeavour, while hugely important, some would argue comes at the complete wrong time and is more of a burden to them than a reward. That's going to conclude today's aviation news. If you have any thoughts, well, the best place you can leave them is down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you same place, same time tomorrow for your latest aviation news recap.
And we'll fly.